What's up, everyone? Welcome to week 2 of Where is God? My name is Ryan, and if you don't know me, I am the newest intern here at Friends Church Junior High Ministry. And this week, I'm going to be talking to you about when I worked at camp. So, this past summer, I worked up at Force Home Christian Camp. Many of you guys probably been there. If you don't know it, it's up in the mountains. It's in Big Bear. Pretty remote, pretty cool. I loved it. But this past summer, at the beginning of summer, our boss kind of stepped up to all of our staff and said, hey, we're not going to prank each other this year. It's just something that goes on every year. We've had bad experiences with it. We're not going to do this. And all of the guys on the staff kind of looked at each other and were like, no, we're going to do this. There's guys and girls here. We got to prank the girls. This is just something we have to do. So as most pranks start, we kind of spent the first 5 weeks of the summer just kind of going through prepping this prank out. And then that prank got thrown out the door because around week 7, we saw a great opportunity and we struck and we took it. So it was about week 8 of summer camp, and summer camp usually goes to about 9-10 weeks. So this is towards the end of summer. And all of the guys, middle of the night one night, said, hey, we're going to do it. This is our time. This is perfect. All of the girls from camp were off going and doing their own thing, so we had the perfect opportunity to strike. Now at camp, the staff that I worked on, we had an all-girls side of camp. So what that meant was they had their own staff lounge for the girls to come rest, kind of just relax, get their mind off stuff, whatever. All the guys said, look, that is their own space, but we're going to take it from them as our prank. So in the middle of the night, all the guys loaded up into this big SUV, and we drove down to the offices. We got there, we made sure nobody was around, nobody was watching us, and we took the girls' staff lounge, all the furniture out of it, we loaded it up into the SUV, and we drove up to the girls' cabin. Now, at this time, the girls were probably dead asleep. We weren't really sure, but we took all the furniture out of the SUV, we grabbed the ladder, and we put their staff lounge on top of their roof. So in the morning when they woke up to the great sight of their staff area on their roof, placed exactly how it was in their lounge. Now the girls, when they woke up, were furious at this because we were the only ones that could have done it. We were the only ones that had access and motive. This was hard because they went in the morning to our boss, and they said, look, all the guys did this. We know it was the guys. It's their fault. Our boss sat us down and said, look, guys, I said no pranking. This isn't okay. I'm not super mad. I'm a little mad. But, we're going to go throughout the day, and you guys are going to have to end up cleaning it up. Well, later in the day came, and all of the guys were nowhere to be found. Nowhere. They were either off doing jobs, they were asleep, nowhere near their radios, nothing. Nobody could get a hold of the guys, except for me. So my boss called me in and said, look, you are the head dean this year, so this is going to fall on you. This is your responsibility. So by myself, I took the SUV, drove up to the girls' cabin, climbed up on the roof, and spent 3 hours in 100+ degree weather cleaning up what we had done. See, in that moment, I instantly regretted it. I was sweating. I was on top of the roof by myself, nobody to help me. The furniture definitely was way too heavy for one person to move it, but I had to get it done because that's what my boss asked. So, moral of the story was me and my friends disobeyed what our boss said, and I had to pay the price for it. I had to move all that stuff by myself. See, this week, we're going to be talking about Esther chapter 3 and 4. Now, the chapter, they don't necessarily get punished by a boss, but they show, instead of disobedience, they show obedience to God. So we're just going to jump right in. In chapter 3, it opens up with a character named Haman. And Haman is the king's right-hand man. See, in chapter 3, he gets elevated to this status of second in command. The only person that has more power than Haman at this point is the king himself. And see, with this power came a lot of not only responsibility, but a lot of greatness to the city that they were living in. And as he's going throughout the town, as he's walking, everyone bows to him to show their respect to him, because he is an authority. But the only person that doesn't bow is Mordecai. See, Mordecai knew that God had more authority than Haman, and that he wasn't going to bow to Haman because Haman was not a god. There's only one God. This made Haman furious, guys, like steam blowing out of his ears furious. And in chapter 3, we see at the very beginning, he goes to the king and he says, look, there's this certain people that aren't worshiping me as a god, who aren't respecting your laws, who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. We should just get rid of them. See, the king trusted him. He said, you have the authority. I'm going to sign this into decree. What the king was essentially signing into decree was that he was going to kill off the Jewish people in this city. And Mordecai found out about this and was just heartbroken. And that's where we end chapter 3. See, in chapter 3, just a quick little recap, because there was a lot thrown at you at once. Haman rises to power. Mordecai does not respect his authority, makes Haman furious, and the king signs the decree. See, next we come into chapter 4. And in chapter 4, we see two key acts of obedience to God. See, chapter 4 starts with Mordecai learning about this new decree, just how chapter 3 ended. Mordecai was so heartbroken that he tore off his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes. That's chapter 1, says it directly. See, in ancient Hebrew customs, the sackcloth and ashes were just a way for him to mourn. And to mourn is to essentially just be sad and be heartbroken over what's going on. So Mordecai, after he learns about this, is heartbroken. And in his way of mourning and showing sadness, he goes through the town just wailing loudly. He's just crying all over the place. And Mordecai made it all the way to the king's gates at this point. But he couldn't enter the king's gates because the king had signed into law years and years ago that you had to be properly dressed. So that's where we're going to leave Mordecai for a sec. Right after that, Esther learns about what Mordecai's been doing, and Esther learns that Mordecai is at the gate. So Esther, what she does is she goes to Mordecai and says, look, I brought you some clothes, put some clothes on, let's talk about this, why are you so upset? But Mordecai explained to her that he wasn't going to put them on. He actually refused to put them on. And he brought her the decree that the king had signed into place, and he said, look, this is going to kill our people. You have to do something about it. Esther was really, really nervous at this point. See, this was something that was huge for Mordecai to ask of her. At that time, you could not go into the king's presence without him summoning you. So for Esther to go by herself meant that she could have been put to death. This was a death mission that Mordecai was asking of her. And Esther even reminded him of that. But Mordecai said, look, you're Jewish too. Don't think for a second that you're going to be left out of this decree once the king finds out. The king's going to have you put to death either way. And Mordecai, even in verse 14, says, you have come into your position for such a time as this. See, Mordecai is giving Esther a call to action. What then Esther does in verse 14 and 15 is that she tells Mordecai, go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, and I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So that was a lot too. So let's recap chapter 4 really quick. See, in chapter 4, Mordecai comes to Esther after his mourning, after being sad, and asks Esther to take action and take stand against what the king has signed into decree. And we leave chapter 4 with this great picture of Esther taking up what Mordecai is giving her and says, look, I'm going to take a stand. no matter what happens. And I'm going to trust God in this, and I'm going to obey God's call to action on me. So you may be asking yourself, how does this story apply to me? Even though the story of Esther does not mention God once throughout the whole book, we can see how their faith in him not only was reflected in their actions, but it also influenced how they responded to that decree that the king had wrote in. See, Esther and Mordecai trusted God, and out of that trust and faith, they were obedient to him. See, one key takeaway from this part of the story is that our faith requires obedience to God. See, our faith requires obedience to God. See, we live in this world surrounded by people who don't believe what we believe. We don't live in a place where we'll get killed for what we believe, but maybe you might get backlash from your friends. They might talk badly about you on social media. You may even lose some followers. But see, the hurtful things they say to us is because we have that faith in God. And it's because of those acts of obedience to God that we do. See, maybe you're afraid to invite your friends to church or even talk about your faith because of what they might say about you. Maybe you don't want to listen to your parents and you disobey what they ask of you. Or maybe you're hesitant to post on social media about your faith. See, Esther and Mordecai were obedient to God even though it was not the status quo. Esther and Mordecai stayed with their beliefs, even though it could have gotten them killed, even though people would have talked badly about them. They still remained obedient to God. See, I used to play basketball when I was in high school. I was actually the team captain on my team. And I was constantly surrounded by teammates who were doing horrible things. See, they would go party, they would cuss a lot, and they would talk badly about not only other teammates, but other people at school too. And I had to make a choice that year if I was going to stay on that team or not. See, God had called up that act of obedience in me. So what I ended up doing was I quit the team, just flat out. I said, look, I can't be in this area. I can't be surrounded by these people. I have to be obedient to God in this situation. Now, I'm not saying don't leave your sports team if there aren't Christians on it. That's not at all what I'm saying. For me, that was just an act of my faith in God. God was calling me to leave that team for something better. And see, I found something better. Out of quitting my sports team, I was able to pour more into my church at that point. And out of that pouring into it came some of the best friends that I've had for 10 plus years. See, this cost me a ton of friends that I had made. And it made me an outcast in school. I got roasted on social media for it. I got a ton of backlash for leaving that basketball team. But see, whatever the cost, the outcome was far greater than what I gave up. See, guys, the cost of leaving my basketball team, it cost me a lot. But the outcome that I had out of that situation was far greater than what I gave up. See, when I gave up those friends, I actually made real friends. I made a community. See, as a Christian, it can be risky to bring up your faith around people who don't believe what you believe. Or even online on social media. It could be hard to defend Christianity. It can even be hard not to join your friends in what they're doing. Whether they're cussing, whether they're talking bad, whether they're gossiping, whatever it is, it can be hard not to join in on that. See, we as humans have a desire to be liked, even though it's not always a good thing. See, Esther risked her life in order to be obedient to God, because that's how much she trusted in him. Esther was willing to do something that she very much did not want to do, that very much could have gotten a lot of backlash for, because she knew that her act of obedience was something that God was calling her to do. So tonight as we close, where is God asking you to be obedient to him? I'm going to say that one more time. Where is God asking you to be obedient to him? Maybe he's asking you to stop gossiping about other people. He may not be asking you to give up a sports team. He may not be asking you to do something that is going to get you killed. But what he is asking you is to be obedient to him in any situation that you're put in. So let's pray. Lord, as we go throughout this week, and we go throughout this year, God, I pray that you help us be obedient. Lord, I pray that you help us learn what you're calling us to be obedient in. And God, I pray that as we take that stand of being obedient to you, that you give us strength and that we can trust that you're going to protect us in it. And it's in your name I pray, Jesus. Amen. All right, guys, so as we dive into groups tonight, make sure that you are checking the comments. That way you can see the discussion questions. Your leaders are going to have questions for you available too. Join in next week. We're going to hear from Allison. We're going to dive further into the book of Esther. It's going to be great, and I can't wait.